All right, hey, this is Dale. A couple of people have asked me about the how the conventions and the whole process went at district and state, and thought about sitting down and typing up a big long essay that everybody gets tired of reading from me. So I figured I'd do a little video recording to try to formulate my ideas a little bit better. Um, so I took a few notes down. First of all, I want to start with the district convention, and I want to first say thank you to Miss Ellen. Her and Bill were instrumental in just letting me know about the process, getting me involved in the process. I really appreciate that. Um, so on to the district convention. A few things that were quite upsetting to me at the district convention, and I felt like that the Ron Paul coalition. I say coalition because I think it's important because it was we did form a coalition with some Tea Party groups. Some people didn't approve of that, mainly because of a delegate that they were trying to push through. But anyway, it was a coalition of multiple groups. It wasn't just Ron Paul people. Um, the the motion was made from the floor at the district convention to limit the way in which the delegates there had the opportunity to vote on who went on to national, whether it be an alternate or a delegate. And Mr. Brant Frost made a motion to simply allow the delegates there in attendance to vote whether they wanted to offer up multiple people to have multiple kind of mini elections, or if they so choose, they could have chose to offer up a slate where it's basically these six people against these six people, or so forth. And that was the gist of his motion that he made. Unfortunately, and this is what was upsetting to me, was that a gentleman by the name of Rob Dahl from Columbus, the Nissan dealership there, that's bankrupt, but he kept, in my opinion, intentionally trying to confuse the issue. Alton Russell, in my opinion, uh, continued that strategy. So what should have taken roughly a matter of minutes to make the motion, just simply allow for a vote, um, ended up taking, I think, seemed like an hour, hour and a half, going back and forth, trying to simply explain what everybody there thought was a rather simple um, proposition. Simply allow the delegates to vote whether or not they want a slate or whether or not they want individual elections to take place. It ended up failing by one vote. There were some issues with kind of the secrecy of whether or not they everybody voice voted, then standing vote, and then they counted the vote. And I don't know why in the world they didn't just count off the votes as they were doing it. They eventually did do that. But anyway, that was one thing that just kind of irritated me. I felt like that the Ron Paul people got a bad rap because they got blamed for prolonging the convention when, in actuality, in my opinion, it was more of the people in charge. And I feel like they were intentionally prolonging it because they had already told everybody that the Ron Paul people were going to intentionally prolong it. It was not our intent. We wanted a slate vote. We wanted to offer up the slate they proposed versus the slate we proposed. One vote, everybody go home. And that's what we wanted, to allow the delegates to have that opportunity to vote. They wanted a slate or they wanted individuals. Um, Turned out it was individuals, and it did drag out for another 2 or 3 hours. Um, but anyway, I'm kind of happy that I was had the honor of being an alternate to national. Um, Unfortunately, Mr. Bill Gilmore, I was kind of out of the loop. He apparently gave a speech that was pretty strong, and then he decided not to run. for whatever reason. I still haven't really sat down and talked with him about that. So on to state. Um, this weekend, this past weekend, long and short of it is that the more of the I'm trying not to use condescending remarks here, but needless to say, we were a little bit short on our numbers as far as the coalition that we tried to form again with the Ron Paul people and the Tea Party people. The few things that I thought were they certainly were fair in some ways. Um, Whenever anyone had a question or wanted to speak, they were certainly given that right. Some of them went on and on, but for the most part, I felt like everything was handled in a proper way, at least for most of the convention. To my knowledge, there were not any real disruptions. I'm sure I wasn't in the convention hall when Newt Gingrich was speaking, but I did hear a few boos that came out of that. Uh, but what can you expect? Mainly, our gripe is when there's still a primary going on. There's still Ron Paul still in the race and Mitt Romney still in the race. And I think by law at a convention, you're not allowed to endorse a specific candidate. So all day long, the various speakers were basically talking down to us, telling us how we need to unite uh, behind Mitt Romney. And I think technically that was against the rules. It's certainly not illegal, but so most of the boos that were heard for that specific reason because we knew that they were breaking the rules and asking us to get behind Mitt Romney. Now, most of them simply said that we just had to unify and get behind, the Republican Party without actually using Mitt Romney's name because they knew the rules. Um, but anyway, I do want to mention two specific encounters that I personally had. I don't want to get into a whole bunch of hearsay, but I guess my strategy was. I was an alternate, so I didn't actually get to vote on anything. So I spent a lot of time out in the walkways and around the tables, and I went up to the Mitt Romney table, and certainly didn't cause a uproar or stink or anything. And there were two ladies. I guess would be the average caucus goer. Convention goer there. Not in their attitude, just in who they were, and they appeared to be about 60, 65 years old. And I was standing there at the table and kind of had standing beside them, and unprovoked, totally, they came up and they were talking to the people at the Romney table, and just completely, talking trash. It was for a mature, 60-ish year old ladies. It kind of shocked me what they were saying about Ron Paul and how terrible his supporters were and how they couldn't believe what they were going to try to do at the state convention. And I just stood there. And of course, the people that were at the Romney table on the other side, they could see that I was a Ron Paul supporter. So they kind of were beginning to feel very uncomfortable. And I just stood there smiling. And finally, one of the older ladies kind of saw me. And she said, asked me why was I smiling. And then she realized I was a Ron Paul supporter. And she came over, and then finally I was able to enter into a little bit of, mutual respect dialogue with her. I think mainly she felt bad because of all the terrible things that she had said about me and, the other supporters. So she listened to me, and she wanted to know what my plan was. And I guess I'll take this opportunity to kind of tell you what my plan is. One, I don't plan on going to the national convention to boo and to cause a big uproar. But as I communicated to her my intentions of going to the national convention, and I would dare say the majority of the supporters that support Ron Paul that are going, it's their intention as well, is to simply enter into a respectful conversation with people and begin to talk about matters of liberty and continue the dialogue that the media on all sides and both parties refuse to allow us to have, and that is the debate on foreign policy. It's a shame that that is taboo while we have thousands of our military men and women serving and dying every year, but yet we're not even allowed to debate the merits of whether or not it's right to bring them home or not. Um, and I continue to talk to her, and we actually ended up having about a 20-minute conversation, and I felt like that, through that, uh, maybe she was able to gain a little bit of respect for me as an individual, and hopefully, begin to see a little bit of the issues that we consider and hold so strongly, and those are the Constitution and liberty. Um, so I thought that turned into a fairly productive, uh, encounter. There was another encounter that I experienced when we went back up to the up in the stands, kind of up high, just so we could get a view of everything from down below. And there were two uh, I don't call them friends, but they were just Ron Paul supporters that were sitting down in front of me, and they were simply holding their Ron Paul signs. Um, and something was said from the convention hall, probably something about the Fed or something like that. And literally, without even raising their sign, up to not even here, they were sitting down and they were holding their sign just in front of their legs as they're sitting, and they just kind of shook their sign, kind of in support of that particular issue. And there were three ladies, once again, roughly around 60 to 70 years old, sitting directly behind them. And the looks and the physical gestures that they were making reminded me of 13 and 14-year-old high school girls. I mean, that were literally gesturing and pointing at them, like they were trying to point out the horns that were popping out of their head or something. And to be honest with you, it really disgusted me um, to see that type of behavior from supposedly pillars of the community. But anyway, so most of you really don't care about all that stuff. They just want to hear about how things actually played out at the convention. Um, the first thing that I thought was pretty interesting, and I actually did see it as an olive branch that the Republican Party was trying to reach out to the Ron Paul supporters, was before really any business got started, they presented a resolution. This resolution was kind of more on an official but yet non-binding way. Um, say that the Georgia Republican Party does not support the NDAA and specifically Section 1031, and then left at that. And the resolution passed overwhelmingly. I mean, it was fixing to be, written into whatever they write it into. And we felt like that this was a good opportunity to allow the Republican Party to put their money where their mouth is. Instead of passing a meaningless resolution, we felt like that they needed to be a tad bit more specific. So we presented an amendment to the resolution that simply stated that since the Georgia Republican Party feels so strongly that they do not support the NDAA, and specifically Section 1031, that there should be some wording in there that says that they will not support any candidate that supports or voted for the NDAA as it so stands today. And that too passed with flying colors initially. It only took a few seconds before I'm assuming the aides to people such as Congressman Len Westmoreland and Zaxby Chambliss and Johnny Isaacs and all of those who voted for the NDAA realized real quickly that this meant that the Georgia Republican Party would not be able to support them. The majority of delegates in attendance did not realize that. They were more concerned about how it would affect Mitt Romney, um, instead of realizing that all of their congressmen that had all the flags up on the walls and senators uh, had actually voted for it. Mitt Romney has never voted for it. He did publicly state that he would have voted for it, but that wouldn't have went against our amendment, and we specifically worded it that way so that it, would have a better chance of passing. Um, Unfortunately, well, I'll when it came time to the Republicans to stand behind the wording and the words that come out of their mouth, I'll just say that uh, the resolution committee withdrew the entire resolution. So instead of making any headway, they completely caved in and gave up. So anyway, so it is. Oh, and this goes out to Daniel, your good friend in the Tea Party who spoke and represented not only, I think her name is Debbie Dooley or something of that nature. I hope that I'm not incorrect in saying that she spoke for the Tea Party, as she said she did anyway. Um, but she gave a really poor speech, I'm sorry to say. And she was actually one of the few that actually got up during the discussion, the debate over whether or not this amendment about the NDAA should take place. She was the one who stood up and said that we needed to kill it all. Um, that she didn't like this amendment, she didn't like the resolution, and the NDAA was not that big a deal, and we were fretting over nothing. So I was kind of disappointed in that coming from at least one of the few official Tea Party representatives there at the state convention. Uh, Ultimately, at the end of the day, we didn't have the numbers. I was pleasantly surprised at as many numbers as we did have. We were pushing 40% there, which I thought was unbelievable at a state convention. The state Republican Party did everything they could without literally saying it and preventing us from coming. It was a very expensive state convention, comparatively speaking, in my opinion. Certainly in relation to what we got, since we didn't get anything. Um, but I think they kind of, in a roundabout way, I feel like that they are trying to exclude us because their impression is that Ron Paul people are poor. So they do everything they can to raise the price up. Maybe the price hadn't changed. I don't know. I admit this was my very first state convention. But the fact that they're all but making me pay $1,500 to stay in their hotel at $300 a night at the national convention, I thought was kind of wrong. Even though now I find out that I don't legally have to do that, but they basically make it where I don't have a choice. So um, the first vote, similar to the district convention. I apologize for going so long. Um, the first vote was basically they changed the rules, and instead of going by Robert's Rules of Order, which the state convention is supposed to go by, but they do have the right to change the rules beforehand. They added a rule which, due to some wording that's very complicated, it basically made it to the point where there were no nominations allowed from the floor. So basically, the nominating committee presented a slate, and our only option was to vote either for the slate or vote it down. And obviously, we didn't have, 50% plus one to vote it down. So we never even got an option to offer a single nomination from the floor. We knew we couldn't go slate for slate with them, but we did hope that, we could at least offer up a few Tea Party members and a few Ron Paul people, give them an opportunity, um, that maybe some people would see them and at least vote for them over maybe, one of the other establishment groups that they didn't like or something like that. And we'd get, a small handful. Ultimately, we felt like that, we had 40% of the people there. maybe 35 or 40. Um, and we felt like we deserved at least a few delegates to the national convention. And the Georgia GOP did not feel that way. We did not get one single person out of state heading to the national. Um, I felt like they could have done a little fairer job than that, but it is what it is. Um, I will mention this one thing, and this was probably the biggest gripe out of all of us. All we wanted was a fair state convention. We wanted our numbers to be counted, and we wanted to be fairly represented. Obviously, we were not fairly represented to the national convention. That's okay. We'll deal with that. There'll be plenty of us there. But the entire convention, Mr. Evans, who was the chairman, and then he got elected committee man for the RNC. Um, but the whole entire convention, he kept repeatedly stating that if you come to the microphone, which the microphones were spread out throughout the convention hall, that if you come to the microphone, you have to frantically wave your arms because I cannot see you. Well, okay, that's understandable. I mean, we all knew exactly, and he abided by that. I mean, we came to the microphones, we waved our hands frantically. He acknowledged us, and he would let us speak. But then when it came time to actually vote, and he would do a voice vote. It was kind of close on a few issues, so we did a standing vote. And when just a matter of 2 seconds, he said, "Oh, that's 50% or 51%, so it passes or it fails." And then when we got to the real critical vote, the only real vote we got an opportunity for, which was whether or not we eliminate that rule and allow for nominations from the floor, someone, I think they raised a certain particular part in the Robert rules, and it had to be 2/3 to pass or to fail. And I was really frustrated at the fact that he could not see up front people at the microphone, but yet when it came time to people to stand up, he could instantaneously recognize the difference between 66% and 68%, and had to have 2/3. And it was ultimately just left up to his decision. All we wanted was a standing count where they should have been organized enough to, you know, figure out a way to, have their people sound off or have ballots or something like that. That's the whole point. We took time, the whole weekend off to come and get a chance to vote. And frankly, I wasn't even a delegate. I was up in the stands off the floor, and I had just as many rights as the delegates there on the floor. I didn't get to vote. They didn't get to vote. So I'm going to try to wrap this up, but it was real discouraging. One, we needed better numbers. We didn't have them, so that's okay. That'll lead me to my final point. But I felt like the Georgia GOP, if they really could have wanted to unify the entire Republican Party, they could have certainly made a better effort. But they don't really want to. They wanted us to show up this weekend just enough to pay our money, but they really didn't want us to have a voice or to have a say, and that was quite discouraging. Um, on the future, we're not going anywhere. That's a lot of the complaints that we've heard. That's our MO, is that we only come around every 4 years. Um, I don't even have that right to say that because I wasn't around 4 years ago. I didn't wake up till about 18 months ago. But I will tell you that our entire coalition is not going anywhere. I just got off of a 2-hour conference call with the Georgia campaign, and we have a plan. And we're now entering into really the plan. The past 9 months have basically been just preparing the foundation. Now we're fixing to implement our plan. And it will consist of every county party, every district party, and the entire state Republican Party. I don't know if that came across too harsh or not, but frankly, if I spoke my mind for real, there would be no question about it. So, anyway, hope it didn't go too long. See you.